Oh boy. Well, very special greetings to all of you and to all of our friends on the broadcast hookup. I haven't seen a podium this big since we stepped off the ark, and this is great. Uh, the have to sort out a few papers here, obviously, but I would again to those of you that are present, it's really wonderful to see all of you again. It was a highlight at Pentecost when we had a chance to be here with you, but those times seem to be so in between. But I'd like to say greetings from my family, and happy that Connie is able to be here. It's been some time since she's been able to travel as well. We are the embattled ones, I tell you. Um, it's great to see when God picks us up and carries us forward. We get things done anyway, you know, in spite of ourselves and our frailties. And I was telling Terry a little bit. I thought I was going to get a free ride, at 86 and a half. I was doing pretty good, no particular aches or pains, and then the roof fell in. Well, no, so I'm enduring with all of you. I'm doing much better. The pain 2 weeks ago in the shoulder, I rediscovered what pain was all about. And I have no idea and why it came on like it did. The x-rays show that there's massive arthritis up there now, and the rotator cuff is history. And so I have this, but I don't have that. I can't hold it up. That's weird. Watch part of your body. You know, it's a strange thing. And anyway, I didn't mean to say all that stuff, but anyway, that's. I just feel so good. It's not sin, but it really feels good to be here, and I feel sometimes like a little kid again. Well, if I get a little on the screwy side, well, you know what's going on. All right, and so I didn't greet all those on the broadcast connections and those who will be visiting the Pacific website archives a little bit later. And we are grateful. I'm very happy that part of my family is here. I have a granddaughter visiting with us from Denver, Colorado as well. So there's a fair contingent here. But overall, and I certainly want to include this, I'm especially grateful to our Father who has expanded his understanding to us, and in this day and age. When I think out at our few numbers, and yet the explosion of knowledge that goes with it, and then the determination to keep it. Now those are all gifts, and I sometimes wonder, who, me? Well, yeah. Now accept it and get on with it. I guess that's about what I'm getting out of it. Now, let me see. Oh, I didn't say pass on the greetings from those meeting with us in Montana. Joanne, which you just heard the announcement about. There's a older fellow from California, Jim, is there all the time. He's our B-man, so he drops in on us and he helps fill out the group. Trish and her kids, and Alantina, and up north, the Wilt family, and Robin and Nancy Corellis, and that's about it. So numbers aren't going to finish this game, it looks like, but anyway. Well, in the last few weeks, I've been very enthralled with some biblical history, especially a portion of Christ's ministry. Now, he was with the disciples for 3.5 years. I want to focus in on about a 5-month period in 30 AD, probably from after Passover in the spring to just before the Feast of Tabernacles in the fall. Now, this was within the last year that he was to be alive in the flesh. And as this time moved on, and he was preparing then to go to Jerusalem and for the Feast of Tabernacles, and then he would then visit in those areas, and you'll find that chronicled as well. Then and he would go on into the Passover and the crucifixion and the subsequent resurrection. So I'm going to stay basically between the bookends of Matthew 13 and Matthew 16 today. Jump into Mark a little bit and a little bit of a commentary now and then. The ministry has a lot of nuances and a lot of things I want to pass on. You can't grab this thing, and you can't scratch your ear either. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Anyway, but yeah. Why? Okay. I had so many notes I had to cut them down, and so I'm trying to go slow so I'll be coherent, which is a game changer in all by itself. But as Christ was working with the disciples, and I tried to reflect this in the handout that you have, and I'm going to probably have to stop just for a little bit and explain some of these things for the folks on the broadcast areas, because when I got into this material, I began to discover very quickly I didn't know as much as I thought I did. And I'm wondering if a whole lot of us, especially our younger people, maybe we don't know too much about Galilee, where Christ called almost all of the disciples, early disciples, from and worked in that area. But he also visited and spent a great deal of time in the Gentile areas. So these were a number of things that began to come up, and I tried to record them, and I tried to break down this 5-month period of time into 3 legs in his journeys. Now, my disclaimer is that this is very basic, and I know I've missed a few stops along the route and so on, but this is in general, because what I want to get to is 2 major public miracles and talk about them and to see how expansive they were. But also within these miracles, later on, Jesus Christ chided the disciples because he said, "Don't you remember?" And there were some things they missed. And I'm wondering if we'll pick them up as we go through this today. And later on, I'll tell you what I feel that they missed. And that is there and is very evident. Well, I shouldn't say that. That's a guilt trip. To me, it is evident. Okay? That's what's there. But we'll get to that. The first leg of this journey, well, wait a minute. Let me back up. For those of you on the internet that doesn't have one of these handouts before you, and if you'd like to have one, you can email me via the Pacific website, and I'll certainly send you one. But most every Bible has a map in the back. The New Living Translation, I feel, has one that's quite clear, and so it's quite simple. But I don't know what I thought. I didn't have a definite picture in my mind about the parameters of Galilee. And certainly because Galilee is a Roman designation of an area of land, okay? Now, if in fact you're there with me out there, and you want to put your finger just north of the Sea of Galilee at Lake Hula, that's that little lake just north of Bethsaida, up the Jordan River. Now, the Jordan River will segregate Galilee from the eastern Gentile areas, and it'll run from Hula down into the Sea of Galilee, out the Sea of Galilee, down toward Jerusalem, and eventually to the Dead or the Salt Sea. All right? Galilee is to the left of that, or to the west. But to my surprise, it didn't go all the way to the coast. It butts up against a strip of land at that time, I'm guessing about 10 miles wide, and that is the Syro-Phoenician area. And as it goes on north, it gets into Tyre and Sidon and so forth. The first leg of this journey, maybe we'll take them one at a time. Oh, wait a minute, I should tell you, try to give you some kind of dimension. The width in miles of the province of Galilee is about 25 miles. The north and south dimensions of the province of Galilee is 50 miles. Now, and all of this plays into the scriptures and shows the movement of peoples, because the Sea of Galilee may look larger on this map, but the Sea of Galilee was only 13 miles north to south and 8 miles wide. You could stand on the seashore, and when you saw certain boats go to sea, you could follow them for miles. And that's how many of the crowds got ahead of Christ, were waiting for him when he got there, and he was mobbed. And I didn't realize the impact, really, that the Christ ministry had upon the people. And I mean, when you add in, I'm really getting ahead of the game here. And then when you add in what apparently Josephus recorded, in the Galilean area, there were 204 villages, or cities they called them, at 15,000 per city. Now multiply that out, and you come out with a little over 3 million people in that condensed area. Now this is all to the west of the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River. Now there were Jews on the eastern side of Jordan, but it was heavily Gentile influenced or populated. But there were Jews there as well. So now, maybe you knew all of this, and I'm just repeating what you knew. But the more I studied, the more I then began to understand what the scriptures were talking about. So let me see where. Yes, I got it. Well, let's start off with the first leg of the journey. There are three. One from Nazareth up through, you see on the map, is Capernaum, but Gennesaret is where they headed for. And then they went across the lake, I believe, to just south of Bethsaida, to where Christ fed the 5,000. Now that's a very interesting feature, because the scripture tells us that there were 5,000 men, not counting women and children. Now, it has been extrapolated by some of the commentaries that there were no less than 10,000 and very possibly 20,000 people at that first miracle. Later on, we'll see that that miracle was replicated down further south in the Decapolis area, with mostly Gentiles, Jewish population included, of course. And they said 4,000. Now you double that for women and children, you come up with at least 8, and it could be 12. Now, what I want to, if I ever get there, and I will, when you begin to look at the logistics of this, all the time, Christ is training these men. He's bending over backwards. He's very patient with them, because remember, they were not begotten with God's Spirit. That came later at Pentecost. Now, God's Spirit was with them, there's no question. But they're still transitioning out of where they came from cultures, ideas, and who knows what all. And they were big, but they didn't always get what Christ was talking about. But he was very patient, but he was grooming them one step at a time toward the ultimate result, to where they would begin to would go out. Now, well, I'll get to that a little bit later on. I think in that first miracle, he trained them. He says, now look, first of all, the people are the most important. Christ was always, no matter how pressed or how mashed or how up against the wall, he took time for people. And we'll read some scriptures here where basically he wanted to get away. He wanted to find some peace and quiet to begin to really spend the time with the disciples. And he was hard pressed, and he finally had to flee the Jewish area to go north, where he was less popular or less known. Okay? And he didn't make it up there completely either. But all the time he's training. He has one eye to his disciples. Now let's don't exclude ourselves from this scenario either. And I think we'll find that some of these verses are very dramatic. There were two major outstanding public miracles. And there is one other miracle, I feel it pertains more to us, and it is very relevant even unto this day. But through this entire thread, there is an emphasis on memory. He said, don't you, well, I'll get to it here in a little bit. Bear with me, okay? Page 1, page 2. I didn't get that far down. Okay, let's turn to I'll be sticking with the King James version. I've been with the King James for so long it's hard to depart, but I'll do most of the reading out of the King James version, although I did bring my New Living Translation, and I want to fill in a bit here and there with that. So let's go to Matthew 13 as a starting point. Okay. Matthew, so I know you. Okay, Matthew 13, and we pick it up in about verse 53. The story now. Christ had been performing miracles and teaching them the parables and so on, and you'll find that in the previous verses. Then we come down to verse 53. Now it came to pass that when Jesus had finished these parables, he departed from there. And when he had come into his own country, so now he's returning to Nazareth, he taught them in their synagogue, insomuch that they were astonished and said, where did this man get his wisdom or his education and these mighty works? Because he was an enigma to his own people. But here we come with the humanistic, say, is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary? In other words, they live right here in the community. He's got all these brothers and sisters. We've known him since he was a youngster and he's grown up. Now, for some reason, this diminishes people in our sight. They didn't recognize that God can use whomever he wants at any time. So there was this visual thing. They didn't see the fruits. And his sisters, verse 56, are they not with us? Whence then has this man all these things? Well, how come he has all this capability? And they were offended in him. But Jesus said unto them, a prophet is not without honor, except in his own country and his own house. And he did not many mighty works there because of their unbelief. So if we could, I'll just plug in Mark 6 and verse 30. through about 34, I think it's worth reading because it fills in some of the background of why Jesus would leave Nazareth. Okay, Mark 6. And verse 30. Well, verse 31. Now Jesus said, "Let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest a while." He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his apostles didn't have enough time to eat. So they left by boat for a quiet place where they could be alone. But many people recognized him and saw them leaving, and people from many towns ran ahead along the shore and got there ahead of them. So Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And when he began teaching them many things, okay, then we come to this, and I think I'll return then to the King James. But the point here is that when he left Nazareth, and there's other scriptures involved here, as far as I'm able to determine, he headed toward Gennesareth, and then from there he went across into Bethsaida, and that's my best guesstimate, and that's where we come to this first miracle of the bread and the fish. But the people, what I wanted to read that verse for was that we get to understand the press, that the people were there. There was really no place. Remember when Jesus said, foxes have holes and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has not a place to lay his head. There's no place for peace. But he wanted time with his disciples. Now, the only way I can see, and I'm getting ahead of the game, but he'll go on, as the Australians say, on walkabouts. Because he will leave, after this miracle, he'll head north to Tyre and Sidon, and make a long loop back, probably through the coast of Galilee, that's leg number 2, into Decapolis. Decapolis is south of the Sea of Galilee. Now, you can begin to log the miles. There's 50 to 100 miles, or maybe even 200 miles. And I got to thinking, man, I know I lose a lot of time just driving a car and looking at asphalt. But if someone's in the car with you and you have an animated conversation, you get a lot of talking done. I wonder if much of the teaching that Jesus Christ was able to pass on to the disciples when they were walking and sharing that time alongside of a road. Because in the Jewish area, he almost had no time to breathe even. Okay, now let me pick this up in Matthew chapter 14 and verse 15. And when it was evening, his disciples came to him saying, "Lord," or "Master, this is a desert place." In other words, it's around us, it is. There are people all over it at this time. "And the time is now past. Send them into the villages to buy themselves victuals or food." And Jesus said unto them, "They don't need to go. Give you them something to eat." Now, he's a master teacher. He got their attention. Because we're looking at, I'm just going to take the mean figure of 10,000, okay? Because I think that's safe. 5,000 men, women, and kids, and so on. 10,000. They told the disciples, "You feed them." Oh, now they got to thinking, right? All right. Now, he didn't do that to put them on or to put them down. There's a way that men can talk to each other and to get to it, And they said to him, he said, "Why don't you give them something to eat?" But they said to him, "Well, we have here 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Okay. And he said, well, bring them to me. And he commanded the multitude to sit on the grass. This is why we feel this is spring, because after a couple of months of that Galilean sun, grass is not green. It's straw, although the protein, I understand, remains in it, so it's good for goats and cattle and so on. Sit down on the grass, and he took the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, looking up to heaven, he blessed, and he broke, and he gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples then to the multitude. Now, we're covering a lot of acreage, a lot of time here. And everyone did eat. And they were filled, and they took up of the fragments that remained 12 baskets full. And they had eaten, and they that had eaten were 5,000 men, about 5,000 men, besides women and children. All right, now let's just explore that just a little bit, because I think it's in the enormity of the miracle that we'll find some answers. Now, oh, I'm sorry. I'm doing that right into a microphone, so my apologies. There is water here too. Oh, you guys thought of everything. Okay. So, if every individual, now all you mathematicians and you very skilled people, wherever you might be, if each person was given 3 square feet or 1 square yard for his territory, and you begin to figure how big of a space that would take for 10,000, what I came up with is about 3 acres. Now, that is subject to criticism, but that's okay. Now, 3 acres, okay, how do we get that in our heads? Well, here in Spokane, if the average city lot is about 1/5 of an acre. So if you would come to a well laid out block of homes, and you drive up one street and you count off 8 houses, okay, and realize that there's 8 on the other side with an alley in between. If you would sever that block in your mind of 16 houses, you would come up with about the acreage that we're talking about. That's another way of looking at it. Now, how many of you know what is the seating capacity of the Spokane Civic Center? That's that? Well, anyways, the big auditorium. Any idea? I went Google. 2,700. Now, if we're talking 10,000 people, we're talking an area 4 times the seating capacity right across the street. Whoa. Now, let's do a little more comparison. Now, if each person got 6 ounces of fish, I think that's about right. Of course, with me, I'd like to have the pound. I dearly love fish. Okay, but let's say that was a serving, 6 ounces of fish, and the bread they had was, I think it was one of those circular, looks almost like an overgrown pizza, about that thick. And when they break it, they could break it into quadrants, and it's about 2 pounds finished loaf. Okay, so about a quarter of that. So if everybody got 6 ounces of fish and 6 ounces of bread, you know what that would be if you had to bring it, if the miracle was okay, and you deposited it all right out there on pallets before he told the disciples to pick it up and disperse it? 5,000 pounds per fish, 5,000 pounds for bread. That's 2.5 tons. Whoa. Now you need a front end loader. Now, I don't think that Christ said, okay, there it is, fellas. But he told them, and he trained them, okay, first, you're a servant. You are going to wait on tables. Later on, he began to send them out. So they began to get into the spiritual experience. And by Acts 6, they were told, you tend to the spiritual and let somebody else take care of the physical. But to begin with, they had to, as we used to say, start on the janitorial crew and learn what it was like and how to be a servant and in whatever capacity it took. And as they learned, then they could move on and God could use them in the teaching capacity. I think that's accurate. But what I feel is that the miracle, and he said, remember he said baskets? Well, a Jewish basket is like some of those clutch bags you ladies carry around. I mean, they're huge. You could get lost in there, and you don't dare stick your hand in there, or if your phone goes off, you can't find it, or whatever. But evidently, the Jewish basket came up to kind of a funnel, and you wanted something, you reached in. Now, I feel that he didn't say, here's a basket that weighs 20, 30 pounds. So you load up and you take it out and disperse it. Another one you disperse it. They'd be running half back and forth. Could it have been possible that they just took the basket, and if these 6 were fish people, men, and others were bread men, and when they reached into the basket, they came up with the appropriate portion to give. And then they reached back in the next time, next person, and sure enough, there's another piece. And that continued until every single individual was fed. Because the number that Christ was going to perform the miracle for wasn't predetermined. They said about. So he'd have had far more than 12 baskets if he'd overshot the mark. Or he would have been way under and some would go hungry, right? No. The key, I believe, there is that as long as there is a need, God will supply the answer or he will fulfill the need. One way or the other, he's going to get the job done. But it takes God's intervention. And so, to me, that was a pretty dramatic miracle, especially when you take a look at the size, the potential size. And of course, the critics, people criticize those numbers to some degree. People criticized and said that Josephus was overestimating too. I don't know. But I tell you, it's sure bigger than the average garage sale. I'll tell you that. But once fed, I can just almost imagine the disciples, this has been a couple hours of pretty rigorous going, and they said, oh, done. And Christ said, no, go back and collect the leftovers. We're not leaving this place littered. Now, I'm going to leave the numerology to somebody else, but they collected 12 baskets of remnants from that crowd, which means there wasn't a whole lot left over, but there were 12 baskets. Now, that meant something to the Jews, 12 tribes of Israel, governmental numbers and so on, but I'm going to leave that to somebody else now. So let's go on to verse 21 of chapter, I'm down to chapter 15 already? Okay. Chapter 15, verse 21. So Jesus went thence and departed into the coasts of Tyre and Sidon. So from Bethsaida, where I believe that they landed, and that's where he fed the 5,000, and also never mind. I said that. That's another miracle that was up north. Okay, so then they headed north, and that's that red line on your map. Okay, he said, I want to get someplace to where we can share, because he was in the last year before his crucifixion, and these men had to be on deck, as we say. So he took them and headed north, and if you look at that, that's at least a 40, 50-mile walk into Tyre, out of Bethsaida, the top of the Sea of Galilee, and then as we read through here, yeah, and Jesus went thence and departed into the coast of Tyre and Sidon. Now that's where that miracle, he healed the daughter of the Syrophoenician woman, and it's because they were waiting for him up there to some degree, but he had more time. Now, if you go from Tyre and head north, you're even going further north into Gentile territory. It's to Sidon, and then it says, oh, let's see, probably should get into the book of Mark. Let's go down to verse 29. We can pick it up here in Matthew 15. 29. And Jesus departed from thence and came near unto the Sea of Galilee. Okay, so he came back by through the Sea of Galilee, around the coast, or sailed across it, and went up into a mountain and sat down there. And great multitudes came unto him, having with them those that were lame and blind and dumb and maimed and many others, and cast them down at Jesus' feet. Now, the book of Mark says that he went to the area of Decapolis. In other words, Decapolis means 10 Greek cities, which is probably a hangover from the Alexander the Great, the Greek, because the Romans took away most of that territory from the Greeks and from their descendants. I think about 60 BC, something like that. But these were is an area, it names it very specifically, Decapolis. So this is where this second miracle, which was similar to the first major one, was perpetrated. Yeah, that's in Mark 7, verse 31, if you want to make a note on that. Okay, 5:15, verse 29. He came near and he went down, okay. So they were waiting for him. Christ again healed in verse 31 more, insomuch that the multitude wondered, and when they saw the dumb to speak, and the maimed to be whole, and the lame to walk, and the blind to see, that, and they glorified, notice, the God of Israel. So this is more of a Gentile reaction. This is your God. We respect the God of Israel. Now, the Jews we would speak of God in a more familiar way, I believe. And in verse 32, and Jesus called his disciples unto him and said, look, I have compassion on the multitudes because they continue with me now 3 days. All right. And have nothing to eat. Now they've run out, and I will not send them away fasting, lest they faint in the way. And his disciples say unto him, how should we, well, King James, when should we have so much bread in the wilderness? Where are we going to find bread? There's no stores around here, as to fill such a great multitude. The memory wasn't kicking in, was it? And later on, Christ brought this forcibly to their attention. And Jesus said unto them, how many loaves do you have? And they said 7, and a few little fishes. So these probably weren't the St. Peter fish. How many of you been to Jerusalem in that area? And you get up there on one of those tours and get one of those perch-like fishes? They call them St. Peter's, you know. And we got a little one. I wanted a big one. But it was good. But it's amazing a sea that small supported so many people with fish at one time. Well, that's quite amazing. There were some heavy-duty fishing industries on that sea, or we call it a lake. I grew up on a lake that was 8 miles wide in many places, but it was 62 miles long. Lake Chelan, right just up over the ridge there, not very far. And they said 7, and he commanded the multitude to sit down. And he took the 7 loaves and the fishes and gave thanks, broke them, gave them to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude, and they did all eat and were filled, and they took up from the broken meat that was left 7 basketfuls. And they that did eat were 4,000 men, besides women and children. That's where we get our figure. He sent them away, and they sent away the multitude, and then he took ship and came to the coast of Magdala. And now you will find that Magdala is on the left-hand side of the Sea of Galilee, and so I didn't quite reach it with that silver pencil, but anyways, from Magdala, and then he returned up towards Bethsaida, because now he is heading for, of all places, Caesarea Philippi. Now that's way back up there again, okay? But a lot of things are going to take place here very, very quickly, all right? So let's see. Oh, this part, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but here is a situation, and we go over to chapter 16 and verse 1. It's always, at least to me, and I think to most men especially, when the boss takes on the opposition and he beards them, you might say, right in there, wherever they are. And this is what happened. And when he headed back up towards Magdala, in that area, it says that let's just read it and we'll comment on it. Chapter 16 and verse 1. The Pharisees also with the Sadducees came. Now they even came up from Jerusalem to be there, or I assume Jerusalem, to attack Christ. So Christ was creating quite a stir in all those communities for months and years on end. So, well, what pops into my mind, you've heard some of this before in sermons. You heard a sermon by Rick Railston on the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Both of these organizations religiously were illicit organizations. They were not of the descendants of the priestly line. They were politicals. They formed, and again, religion is one of the most powerful bodies there is, and Rome found that out. And as they collected their massive armies and all under the religious banner, and then they began to teach things that had people scared half to death. How did Martin Luther control the kings of Europe? You either do it this way or your soul's going to go to hell. And so they implanted the doctrines of Dante's Inferno. And so, I mean, how do you control a 6'5" warrior of some of these countries, and the Germanics are up in the Nordics? You got to control their mind. And so the Pharisees and Sadducees developed, and they controlled the Jewish people per se. And they actually ruled the common life, and then somehow they got control of the temple as well. And it's unbelievable, because neither one of those groups believed what the other one believed. It was amazing. But when they got to Magdala, they were waiting for him. Okay? So, and they tempting, desired him that he would show them a sign from heaven. Well, they didn't believe the healings. They didn't believe anything that had been done so far. But what their point of view is, they demanded, we're in charge. We're the bully boys on the block. You will conform. And Christ didn't kowtow. Okay? He answered and said unto them, when it is evening, you say, it'll be fair weather, and for the sky is red. In the morning it'll be foul weather today, for the sky is red and gloomy. Oh, you hypocrites, you can discern the face of the sky, but can you not discern, excuse me, the signs of the times? Now, if you have an older King James, you will find a little B or something right over signs. It goes right to the center margin, and here is a list of the prophecies of the coming Messiah. He says you can't even read the signs of the times, in other words, the scriptures, because the Pharisees weren't really interested in scripture. That sound reasonable? They had their own writings, their own deducements, their own whatever they had come up with, and that's where they circled up the wagons. And this is what Christ is going to warn the disciples about. So he says, you won't. In essence, you won't go to the scriptures, and you won't seek out the truth. So, okay, now, a wicked and adulterous generation. An adulterous person sells himself to the highest bidder. Okay? They're meat for hire. Christ put some heavy-duty labels on these folks. A wicked, a perverted, and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, but no sign shall be given unto you. And there it is. I'm not going to perform some kind of circus event for you, except the sign of the prophet Jonas. So even here, he said, if you want to understand what this means, you're going to have to go back to the scriptures. And so he always put that up there. So, it's a marvelous thing that we have been given the privilege of understanding and actually defending in a proper way the scriptures that we do understand. You see, and that we're willing to be corrected. We're willing to learn. The Pharisees are not willing to learn. They will not bend. We have our tradition, and of course you've heard quite a bit about that from this pulpit. Not me, but from this pulpit. And it's very accurate. So I just loved it, though, that Christ waded in on there and very tactfully, Christ never lost his cool. But he did not submit to anything that was wrong or evil either. Okay. And then he said he left them. And when okay, now as we continue here, I just wanted to make sure I get all these pieces in here, because when they left here, they headed toward, like I say, Bethsaida and on up toward Caesarea Philippi, and there's a very memorable occasion there that we want to go through, and it's all right here in chapter 16. And when his disciples were come to the other side, so they had sailed across from Capernaum or Magdalia to the other side, and they had forgotten to take bread. Now, the author here put this little nuance in here to show us that where their thinking is going to go. They had forgotten to take any food. And Jesus said unto them, out of the blue, you can imagine, here they are, they're maybe in a boat or whatever, they're moving to the other side, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, Jesus said, take heed and beware the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Oh, where did that come from? They were all concerned that they hadn't prepared for the journey. Their minds were still in transition, okay? And they reasoned among themselves, saying, is it because we have taken no bread? They went right back. Isn't that when somebody looks at you sternly and you say, oh, what have I done? Well, it's kind of that way. All right. Which, when Jesus perceived, he said unto them, O you of little faith. Now, he didn't say they were faithless. He said, you have faith, but it is small or minuscule at this time. Now, faith involves trust and belief. It takes time to go through and build belief, okay, or to get the understanding. It takes a lot of study. But the trust, and Christ was always doing what he needed to do, tried to do so that they could trust him. He never once let them down. He never failed. Now, men fail, but Christ never did. Now, this is rather interesting in verse 9. Do you not yet understand, neither remember? Okay? Understand, remember the 5 loaves and the 5,000, and how many baskets you took up? Neither the 7 loaves or the 4,000, and how many baskets you took up? So he was bringing their minds back and trying to connect the dots for them or with them. How is it? We'll come back to this in just a minute. I want to explain verse 9 a little bit more. How is it that you do not understand that I spoke it not to you concerning bread, that you should beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, the Sadducees? Then understood they, just a little more talking sometimes, bingo. Although there is this other miracle that must be entwined in here, and we'll get to that as well. Then understood they how he bade them not beware of the leaven of bread, but of the doctrine, the corrupted, the spoiled, the ugly doctrine, belief system, and attitude of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. It is lethal, and it is subtle. Okay? Now, verse 13 says, when Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, so they were on their way up there. We'll get back to that in just a minute. Back to verse 9. Just a little research that I went through, which meant a lot to me, and I'll share that, this. He says, don't you yet understand and remember? Now, if you go to Bible Hub and take and bring that scripture up, you will find in the translation there, right below it, it'll begin to take the words apart for you, and and right under, I believe it is, understand is VPIA-2P. And interestingly enough, on remember, same thing. Now, I am not the greatest English major, okay? That wasn't my forte. Sometimes it was recess, but what he is saying, and it bears out, right now you don't remember nor understand. Right now. Didn't say they wouldn't. Now, the V it's a verb. Understand is a verb. Remember is a verb. Okay. P is present. In other words, right now you don't. Okay. So it's in the present. The I and the A, I is imperfect. Okay. So that's the past. And this, I don't know if I can pronounce this correctly or not. Aorist, the aorist classification of this is past action. So you can properly translate this right now. You don't remember nor understand, but he didn't say you never would. It was a condition they had right at the moment because there was another element they needed to help them really put this into the memories. Now I I feel the more we can visualize a scripture or a concept, like I tried to do with the number of people and how much room it would take and so forth. That's in here now. I've only gone over it 30 times. I mean, I was fascinated with this. Okay, now, so, oh, dash 2p. 2 is second person, from one person to another, in this case from the teacher to the pupil, from the Christ to the disciple. P, plural. So he says, when he said you, he meant every one of them. Okay, and this will figure in a little bit later on because he asked the disciples a question, and even though Peter answered for the group, he was talking to every single disciple. Okay, I'm kind of getting ahead of this a little bit, but I think it's 5 and verse, okay. I had a note down here that I don't know what time it is. I'm just about on the hour. Yeah. Do I have another 10 minutes, sire? At least. Oh, buckle down. No. Where was I? Oh, I don't know why I put that note right in there. Oh, it was the attitude of the Pharisees. That the arrogant attitude that we know it all, we have collected it all, and are guardians of the truth. And so we're in charge. Therefore, he tried to demand of Christ, give us a circus. He wouldn't do it. He said no, not at all. Now, something came up just a few days ago, and those of us that are elders and have been around a day or two, we remember many years ago that we were taught, and we were to pass this on because this was fundamentally an edict from church administration that brethren were not to get together and discuss scripture, right? Certainly not without a minister present. And, that is so demeaning, in my opinion. I see it now very clearly. Now, there was a few people went wingnut, and they took off, censor, wingnut, and they got into trouble. But to lay that as a blanket over all of the brethren is to say that we can't really trust you because you don't have the Spirit like we do. Now, I learned a long time ago when I got a new assistant, he came out to the field, and some of them really needed some help. I said, look, every person in this room is converted, has the same Spirit you do. You may know more scriptures than they do, but they know how to live the ones they do know. And those that responded to that actually became helpful servants of the people. And so I learned a few things as we went along. But now I understand that that very same old ruling is being revived and coming into force, not in Pacific, but in other areas. And it's that same attitude, and it's really, really too bad. Okay, let's go on here in chapter 16 and then wrap this up. Oh my! I had so much to tell you, and I wrote it all down. I shouldn't have. I don't know where that went, but I wanted to. There's one other point I really wanted to get across. There you are. Okay. This is what I call the miracle that affects everyone, and this is the third major one that popped out in this particular study. In verse 13 of chapter 16 of the book of Matthew, Now, when Jesus came into the coast or the region of Caesarea Philippi, and this is now quite north and west of the Sea of Galilee. Now, the um, the folks that were after him were in a little bit of a different area, so Christ was playing it cool, and he knew that his time was running out. He had now about 6 or 7 months left before his crucifixion, and so he's timing this a little bit. We do know that when he returned from Caesarea Philippi, and on your handout, I have that long black or dotted thread from Caesarea Philippi back toward Jerusalem. That is incorrect. If you read chapter 17, 18, 19, you find that Christ went back into the area of Galilee, and he visited several different places and performed miracles before he went to Jerusalem. Okay? All right. Now, just so you'll know. All right. Now, okay, now, here, Jesus came into the coast or in the area of Caesarea Philippi, and he asked his disciples, saying, "Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" Now, this was gone over just recently in the sermons from here as well. And they said, some say that you are John the Baptist, and others say you're Elijah or Elisha, and Jeremiah or one of the resurrected individuals, and so on. But he said unto them, now he was talking to them, he said, when he said in verse 15, he said unto them, but who do you? And that is a plural and emphatic word. The you went to every man there, not just one. Even though I say, Simon Peter responded, but who do you say I am? And Simon Peter then spoke up. He said, you are the Christ. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And boy, what a mouthful that was, and actually is. So we come down then to verse 17. Jesus said unto him, you're blessed, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not, and maybe I could emphasize it, cannot reveal. Flesh and blood has not revealed this unto you, this understanding, this conviction, but my Father which is in heaven. That is awesome. But the very fact that this is, like I say, the you there is plural, and it is emphatic. In chapter 16 and verse 21, it says, and from that time forth began Jesus to show unto his disciples how he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and the chief priests, the scribes, and be killed and be raised again the third day. And that's where he took even more time with them before he returned, went down into the area of Jerusalem and finished out his ministry there. I hope there's a few additions to your memory storage. And there was one thing I did not plug in there, which I feel is very important. Science has now shown, and I saw a documentary here some time back. I don't think it was by Dr. Amen, but anyways, they had some pictures of the inside of the skull. And they put people into some memorization process. And those ganglia back there, where the brain was processing information, as it was used, they would plump out and swell. And in the case of new information, the brain would create new areas to store it. Now, if there was a storage area and that information wasn't used, You could watch it disappear before your eyes. Whoa. Now that's amazing. This is the creature that God made, you know, all of us. And in here goes on so many fascinating things. But in all of this specialized equipment that we have, there still has to be this third miracle. God's revelation, God's hand inside of us. And I just cannot ask you to really follow up on that and really take some time to think about it and to work with that. And as Mark has said, to give God the glory and try to attach that all the time. Now, I want to leave you with just one simple but hopefully in-depth question to ponder. If, and here you got to use your imagination now a little bit, what if, and Jesus Christ, as a son of Judah, and my concept has changed a lot. You know, I used to see some of these Jewish people down there in whatever, selling jewelry and whatnot. Wrong impression. Most of these men were 6 feet tall. Some were light-headed or lighter. They didn't all have black hair and different color eyes. I've seen Jews this way. But anyways, that's beside the point. But I see them as a stalwart group of people. And if Jesus Christ could step in here, okay, and ask the very same question of the disciples that he asked the disciples and Peter. But what if he said this, put it this way, but still asked the same question? I, Jesus, I know what many people say I am. I am the creator of all things. I am the am, quoted in the book of John. They say that I am the second in the Godhead and co-equal with the Father. I'm the God of the Old Testament. I'm the spokesman for a silent Father. I'm the one who spoke from Mount Sinai, thundering the Ten Commandments, and I am the dominant individual in the coming resurrection of the dead. But then he would finish it off this way. But who do you say I am?